Smarterfan.
Hey everybody, welcome to another segment of Smarterfan podcast, where we bring you behind the veil of sports, business, and life. I'm Joe, and this is Barry. How you doing, Barry?
I'm feeling good, Joe. I'm feeling good. I've feeling good, buddy. Had a good dinner and had just finished coaching these young men, and it's been a good evening. And now I'm doing what I love to do, which is being on Smarter Fan Podcast with you, good buddy. So we're having a good day.
Right. So we do bring you behind the veil of sports business. So I'm going to take it from a different angle. Back in the 70s, Budweiser was the king of beer. And their philosophy was basically, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay. So Miller, on the other hand, who was owned by Philip Morris, had a lot of money to spend. So they bought out Meisterbrow, who at the time was working on a what they called a diet beer. So Miller saw this as an untapped market. So what they did was they figured, who are the biggest beer drinkers? Sports fans. So they took that concept from Meisterbrow, tweaked it a little bit, and they came up with light beer from Miller. Now, what they figured was these macho sports fans aren't going to go for a light beer. So they enlisted the likes of John Madden, Mickey Mantle, Joe Frazier, and Matt Snell to do those hilarious light beer commercials. Yeah. You know? So then Miller, the sales took off for light beer. So then Budweiser was caught completely flat-footed on this. So they had to come up with their own light beer, which they did they called it Natural Light because they didn't want to put their name on it at this point. So then they enlisted the same, sports heroes to do their commercials. But in a shrewd business move, Miller bought the airtime to all of the major sporting events. So, yeah. So that left Budweiser out in the cold. So what they did was they started sponsoring the teams of the four major sports. And and what they did was they became the major sponsor for this small upstart network called the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network. So, they put ESPN on the map. Okay, so then what they did was that gave them exclusive ad rights. And then, so what they wanted to do was they wanted to attract a younger crowd. So then what they did was during the Super Bowl, they introduced a commercial that had, younger people in bathing suits, and they introduced a bull terrier by the name of Spuds McKenzie. So this set the standard for the Super Bowl commercials at that time. And that's what took Budweiser global. And they've been back on top ever since.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Man, you always come with the history. Every time I think I get a little bit ahead of you, you come and you squash me like a flea on a hot dog. But that's good stuff, buddy. Wow, I never knew. That's good history. Good history.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You were talking about Jim Brown and his illustrious lacrosse, period. So what's going on with that? What's happening with Jim Brown and lacrosse?
Well, a lot of people don't know. Usually when you hear Jim Brown, you think about the Cleveland Browns, you think about Syracuse University, right?
Mhm.
And you don't hear about his stellar career in lacrosse. Now, for those
Right.
who don't know, lacrosse is actually a Native American game. It
Mhm.
was created by Native Americans. It's their game. It's our game because many of us are indigenous or aboriginals to America. So
Mhm.
he was an All-American. He set so many incredible records like he did in football, in lacrosse. And actually, that was probably a sport of all the sports that I played that I wish I'd have gotten the opportunity to play in high school. Um,
Mm.
I really loved the game.
Yeah.
And it just incorporated everything. You got a little baseball in there. You got a little football with the contact. You actually do wear a form of helmet and shoulder pads, you know.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it's just fascinating, with all the things. Jim Brown, football player, activist, movie star. I mean, his life is like a a movie. Even I was watching something about how he was raised by his grandparents and mom in an
Mhm.
island off of Georgia, right?
Mm.
And what that was like, and how that shaped him. And I watched an interview before he passed away of, because people always felt, because he took no shorts. He told it like it is, right?
Yeah.
And even in his Hall of Fame speech back in the 70s, he, people had their issues with Jim because Jim would tell you straight up,
Yeah.
and one of the most fascinating things of the movie One Night in Miami that talks about the friendship between Malcolm X, Jim Brown, and the singer
Sam Cooke.
Sam Cooke.
Mhm.
Yes, which is and amazing when you think about it. These three icons are like best friends, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
just how in the movie he was a little embarrassed of talking about his movie career because movies back then weren't as the big thing they are now. So here he leaves the NFL, right, into this kind of fledgling movie industry. You're kind of acting, what's that about? And the rest is history. But all
Mhm.
the backstory, as you said, the backstory is those black movies saved Hollywood because
Mhm.
nobody was going
Yeah.
to watch any musicals. Nobody wasn't
And
going to go watch, Dorothy and the three. They weren't watching that. So
right. Yeah. Yeah.
it was a different time, a different energy in the '60s, and so black movies came back to the fore. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's my Jim Brown story. He's one of my favorite all time people, and he's just amazing,
Oh yeah.
really amazing guy. So that's my Jim Brown story. I'm gonna come up with these stories next week. I'm gonna come with Rosie Greer, who just turned 91, of
God
the
bless.
fearsome, God bless, of the fearsome foursome, with him and uh, Merlin Olsen
Mhm.
and
Deacon Jones.
Deacon Jones, and there's another gentleman and Rosie Greer, and
Yeah.
how they terrorized the NFL again back in the late '60s, '70s, and
Mhm.
I just couldn't believe Mr. Greer was still alive. So I'm a I'm gonna pass it off to you because I know you got something else cooking over there. I can smell it cooking. I can smell it.
Yeah. Well,
What you
speaking of
got?
the NFL, well, this it's been a frenzy this week. We have what I call the running
Yeah,
back.
buddy.
Yeah, the running
Yeah,
back carousel. You know,
yeah.
Derrick Henry went to the Ravens. Okay,
What a
so
steal! What a steal!
yeah. So now you got DC's having to worry about Lamar running or that freight train coming at you. you know?
That's gonna be a long day. That's gonna be a long day.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then Saquon went to the Eagles, which has all the Giant fans up in arms. You know?
I'm so glad he. I just so glad he got his money. I'm so
Yeah,
happy. I don't care.
yeah.
I'm a Giants fan. I'm not an Eagles fan, really, but I'm glad he got his money. And this is what you have. This is what happens when you don't take care of your people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Mm-hmm.
you made a decision to give the money to the quarterback and not to the running back. Well, live with it. Live
Yep.
with it.
Yep.
Uh, live with it.
Josh Jacobs went to the Vikings. I mean, no, he went to the Packers. And that's going to be an interesting dynamic there. DeAndre Swift went to the Bears. And
so Josh Jacobs left the Raiders and went to the Packers?
Yep. And
the
Packers,
they must have given him his money.
They dropped Aaron Jones like a bad habit.
Yeah, it's tough.
And he went to the Vikings,
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Mixon went to the Texans. And
he did. Okay.
Yeah, that's where he went. And the Giants picked up Devin Singletary. So.
Oh, really? Who was with Chicago for a minute?
Then
with the Lions, and now he's with. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then now we got the quarterback shuffle. Okay, now you called it, Barry. You called it because Russell Wilson went to the Steelers. Right?
I try to tell people that's where he's going.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell you that's where he's going. They're back in it again.
Yes, they are. Now, Minshew, he went to the Raiders. Okay.
Interesting.
And I can't see him in a Raider uniform, but that's neither here nor there.
But you know what he's very much like? He's like the snake.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Right? He can pull that off. If they put the right pieces around him, the guy can play. Now it's just being in the right system. He doesn't make many mistakes, and he can play. And in that Raider mystique, he may be that he'd be able to bring back that Raider mystique of like Kenny Stabler.
Right. Maybe.
In my humble opinion.
Time will tell. But anyway,
it always does.
Now, last week I had touched on the dark side of gambling in sports, and this guy, he worked for the Jaguars. He took it to a whole new level. He was his name was Amit Patel, and he was in charge of the Jaguars' virtual credit card program. And over a 3.5-year period, he stole $22 million from the Jaguars. Paying off gambling debts, private jets, heavily into fantasy sports. He was heavily into FanDuel and DraftKings. And, this guy, he was just going on a tear, buying all expensive, lavish gifts and all of this stuff. And they caught up to him and they got him for wire fraud, and he got 6.5 years. And
that's it?
Yeah, that's what I said, and he has to pay the Jaguars $21 million back, and he has to go to Gamblers Anonymous.
I don't know what to say about that. Okay.
But anyway, so let me ask you this. What's going on with Club Shay-Shay this week?
I love Club Shay-Shay because him and Gilbert Arenas are incredible. Him and Ocho are hilarious. And they always have something new. And Club Shay-Shay got into what is a big, big topic for me, which is coaching and lazy coaching. Right? So they had a special on him, and Gilbert was talking about how a lot of coaches have been basically time managers. They're not they're not looking at the pace of the game, the flow of the game, or any of that. They're just managing minutes. And that's why you're seeing such a inferior product on the floor. Like, Gilbert was saying, many times guys are out there cooking, like Austin Reeves for the Lakers. He's cooking. He is cooking. Marvin Ham pulls him out of the game, doesn't bring him back into the second half for 5 minutes. They were just really just showing how these guys are just managing minutes. They're not coaching. And I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm seeing what I'm seeing, which also led me to my next point, which was someone and I got in a conversation about Nick Saban leaving college football. And the eureka moment hit me in the head, and it was like, well, it's a different scenario. It's a different scene. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you've been the plantation owner And now the former plantation workers are able to make more money than you or as much money. You have to change your technique. You have to change your style. And maybe he
Right.
just said, I can't change my style. And so the person and I were going back and forth. And I just said to him, and I left it here. I said, maybe that's why he left the NFL. It didn't work out because you can't talk to grown men like that. And the
No.
guy said, touche, checkmate. Yep. And it's just different. And I think a lot of college coaches are going to be struggling with how do I coach these young men, and I think there are going to be a lot of folk going to Boulder to talk to Coach Prime of how to do that, right?
Yeah,
Of
man.
how to do that, because it's a new
Yeah.
day, it's a new flow. So they were talking about that. And last but not least, I'm drawing the line in the sand, Joe, and say officially, ESPN is dead. They have come to the end of the line. The ESPN we grew up on, Joe, the ESPN we grew to love, they're done.
Well, hey,
And you
all
watch
things
what
must come to an
happens.
end.
You watch what happens. They're done. They don't get it. They don't understand it. And all these athletes stepping on what podcasts is the birth of a new day that they've been dreading, but they knew it was coming. So, my good friend, I pass it. I throw the bomb, not like Kirk Cousins, but I throw the bomb to you down the field, because I know you'll catch it. What you got? What you got for me, man?
All right. I'm gonna switch gears a bit and talk a little bit about boxing, because Muhammad Ali is gonna be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame on when they broadcast WrestleMania 40. And he was the guest referee in the very first WrestleMania, and he refereed the tag team match between Hulk Hogan and Mr. T and Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah. And he also, back in '76, he did an exhibition match with Antonio Inoki, who was another wrestler. And that match was credited with being the precursor for MMA. So, yeah. I mean, it was an interesting match to say the least, So,
yeah, to say the least.
And Ali, he had said that he learned a lot of his trash talking from Gorgeous George.
Yeah.
He said he used to go see Gorgeous George, and the man could just talk a mile a minute, and Ali said he said, oh, I'm going to take this a little further. And that's what he did, and hey, it worked for him. Self-promoting worked for him.
Self-promotion always works.
It always
works if you know how to do it.
He knew how to work it.
Yeah, working and timing of it couldn't have been better. Again, the 60s, a time of change, a time of upheaval, a time of breaking down the norms.
Right.
Perfect timing. A black man talking like that in the 60s, you know what I mean? When there was still places in this country that, you had white and black water fountains. You know what I mean? There's certain places you couldn't go. Yeah. Restaurants you couldn't eat. Establishments you couldn't eat in. You know what I mean? And so it didn't matter how much money you had. And so that is a very, very important history that should never be forgotten. I was actually talking to the young men I was coaching tonight, and I said, you guys are and I don't blame you, but a lot of you are fundamentally unsound when it comes to basketball. Because what you grew up on is not basketball. It's this Euro stuff where they don't play defense. Everybody shoots. And, most of these guys really couldn't play on the playgrounds of New York, Chicago, LA, where guys are out there balling. You know what I mean? And so, what you guys grew up with. And I said, go back and watch Allen Iverson and watch these guys, Michael Jordan, play in college. Look at their feet. Look at their shot selection. Look how they pass the ball. It'll help your game tremendously. Because right now, y'all just trying to shoot from the half court line, don't know how to play no defense. It's a hot mess. So anyway, we had a good practice and we had a good run. And so, yeah. You know, you got to know the history of your game. Got to know what the history of your game. And there's a lot of lazy coaching, which doesn't help. You know, fundamental stuff. You know, fundamental stuff. But yes, go ahead. What you got?
Well, anyway, Anthony Joshua took on Francis Ngannou, and he made short work of him, to say the least. I mean, the fight lasted 2 rounds, 2 knockdowns, and 1 knockout, and that was it. And it was good night, Irene.
Yeah. I had a lot of people ask me about that fight and what I thought. But go ahead, sir.
Well, you know, and then you got Mike Tyson is going to take on Jake Paul. Now this ought to be interesting. He's going to be 58 when this fight takes place in July. You know, Jake Paul, he knocked out Nate Robinson. You know, and so he wanted to fight Mike Tyson. So now he's going to get his wish. But they said that Tyson is knocking down sparring partners, you know, as he's working out.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. They're going to air it it's going to be on Netflix when it airs. And Paul's what, 27? And, you know, but it's
entertainment.
At this point, yes, that's all it could be. I mean, him and Roy Jones, they fought to a draw in their exhibition fight, you know. But I mean, the first thing that came to my mind when they said Tyson, I said, why? Does Tyson really need to do this?
Well, you're asking my opinion?
Yes.
It's a different place and space, but you just saw it. You saw Muhammad Ali doing what? WrestleMania.
True.
Did he do? So you got to understand the role of entertainment. So you know what I'm saying? You know,
yeah.
Ali is bigger than boxing. Mike Tyson is bigger than boxing. I mean, he set his legacy in boxing. You know, one of the things I got to say is this Jake Paul guy is probably really one of the smartest young men ever. This guy is going to walk out of this by the time he's 30. If he may become a billionaire because he's caught the right wave. He's athletic enough to make it interesting. Because Joe, we have to be honest, the last 30 years of sports has not been the traditional sports we grew up on.
True.
We're purists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a totally different landscape. When athletes began to make moves to different teams, it changed the purist game, right? And that opened the door for guys to do other things and have other options and have other revenues, streams of revenue. So, I mean, it's a big story either way it goes. If Jake survives, it's a big story. If Tyson knocks him out, which I think he's going to do,
he could.
It's going to lift his mystique even higher, right? Because now it becomes, sugar. You know?
Yeah.
You know, Mike may be 57, 58, but that power ain't go nowhere. You know what I mean?
Michael Moore found that out.
You see what I'm saying? So again, it feeds into what? The whole social media. Because these kids of the last 30 years, they don't know fundamentals. They don't know purists. They don't know loyalty. They don't know. They don't do that. They grew up under LeBron's here for a few years. He's here for a few years. It's super teams and all. That's norm for them. That wasn't the norm. That wasn't the norm for us. And I'm not hating on it. I'm just saying that's the reality. And so, you know, with social media, it's a totally different game. It's a totally
Mm-hmm.
different game. You know, it's a totally different game. So it's exciting times. But I just got to throw this in here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm praying literally at this point that somehow, some way, Justin Fields gets away out of Chicago. I thought he was going to it. And if he doesn't get out of there, or there's not a major change or something, they're going to ruin this young man's career that was going this way. For these guys, because I called it. If you go back, I said these guys are going to make this guy the scapegoat, this kid, and they're going to bring in their guy, and their guy is going to have to flop. But that'll give them 3 or 4 years to secure, a contract to continue coaching. And then they're going to put Justin Fields in positions where either he's got to go save the game because this guy can't perform. And I'm not wishing anything bad on the guy. But this is the other side that Shay-Shay and Gilbert talk about that people don't realize, that people can come in, a coaching change can totally change your career, good or bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And the philosophy of the front office, because people are really not, vested in you or in your career. I mean, back to Saquon. What more could you have asked Saquon to do for the Giants? He doesn't choose. He doesn't draft. He's not the GM. He's not the ownership. He got on the field and he did the best with what you gave him to work with. So the defense just sat basically in a box and knew their quarterback's not that good. They got to give the ball to Saquon. And people were like, when he got hurt, and I was like, well, if you're the offense and you're playing the running back position, you're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Because you're getting an inordinate amount of reps because you don't have a quarterback who can throw the ball, and you don't have an offense who can block, and you can't get the ball down the field.
Yep.
So eventually you're going to get hurt. It's not rocket science,
Nope.
And then, why we ain't give him the money? Well, okay, now live with it. Philly said, we'll give you the money.
Yeah.
Come back to Pennsylvania, where you grew up. You went to Penn State. Come on back, and let's go make a run for it. And I guarantee you, they're back in the hunt. They are back in the hunt. Because if you got to think about Jalen Hurts, Brown, and Saquon coming at you, that's a problem. That's a problem. That's a problem. So, my friend, Justin Fields, these lazy coaches and lazy players, unfortunately. Saquon is back. Nick Saban is, I ain't mad at him. Enjoy your time away, Nick. And, of course, my favorite of favorite, Jim Brown, the lacrosse. Somebody needs to do, I think it'd be nice if somebody did a movie on Jim Brown and his lacrosse. That'd be interesting to see.
Yes, it would.
Very interesting to see. Because Jim Brown, man.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying, Joe? Those are the images we grew up with. Jim Brown was an athlete of the 50s. I remember the Sports Illustrated cover that had him in a Raiders uniform threatening to come back to the NFL.
I remember that.
46.
I remember that. Yes, because he didn't like the way Franco Harris was going after his record.
Yeah. And when you start to think about how he's done, anyway, let me stop. I can talk about Jim Brown forever.
Yeah.
I love me some Jim Brown. So that's what we got for your Smarterfan podcast. You got the past, you got the present, you got the future, you got a little Shay-Shay, you got a little seasoning. You know what I'm going to talk about next week, which is what Coach Prime highlighted on, is the nutrition of elite athletes, D1 athletes. You know what I'm saying? And how important that is for athletes. So I'm going to talk about that next week, because that needs to be talked about. Because you can't run these Ferraris on a Happy Meal. You can't run these Ferraris on a Happy Meal. It don't work. It don't work. So again,
all right.
Smarterfan podcast. Stay in the game, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Take care, y'all.
Smarterfan. Smarterfan.